Early on in Jesus' ministry in John chapter 2, during the Passover celebration, he goes into Jerusalem. John chapter 2, verse 13 records what happens next. It says, "It was nearly time for the Jewish Passover celebration, so Jesus went to Jerusalem. In the temple area, he saw merchants selling cattle, sheep, and doves for sacrifices. He also saw dealers at tables exchanging foreign money. Jesus made a whip from some ropes and chased them all out of the temple. And he drove out the sheep and cattle, scattered the money changers' coins over the floor, and turned over their tables. Then going over to the people who sold doves, he told them, 'Get these things out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a marketplace.' Then his disciples remembered his prophecy from the scriptures. Passion for God's house will consume me." But the Jewish leaders demanded, "What are you doing? If God gave you authority to do this, show us a miraculous sign to prove it." "All right," Jesus said, "destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." Sometimes when you look at scripture, you have to really think about what's going on here. Well, in this context, the people were still practicing the Old Testament rituals of sacrifice. They would often come to the temple. Some would come too poor to have their own animals, or they would be city people, I guess, who didn't have certain animals. And so that they would exchange money for a sacrifice, and then they would offer that up to God. But what had happened was a whole industry had formed there in the temple courts. And Jesus gets there, and it was less about the things of God and more about this idea of money. And it's not that God is against offerings and sacrificial giving. That wasn't what this was about. It was about people who were using improper balances and scales, people who were manipulating a system, and it had nothing to do about seeking the things of God. And so Jesus comes in and he disrupts what's going on. And the reason he disrupts it is for this reason. He says, passion for God's house will consume me. If you go through the Gospels, you'll see that every Saturday or every Sabbath day, Jesus was preaching in the synagogues. He was passionate about being in God's house. Eventually, we're going to get back to getting into God's house. We're going to get back to being allowed to go in to this place that we've set aside to worship him. The state is opening up certain restrictions or at least alleviating certain restrictions. So I think very soon, once we figure out exactly all the details, we're going to go back to having church. But the words that came to me the words that stood out to me in verse 17 were the ones that said, "Passion for God's house will consume me." When we go back, my prayer is that a passion for God's house, a passion for a place set aside for God will consume us, and we will worship him in a way like maybe we've never done before. Hope you have a great day today.